We don't need to be reminded what the last year has been like. The nation in which we live and the global community as a whole have been sick. But beyond virus and pandemic, other systemic issues have been torn open and exposed. Racial injustice, disparities of wealth and resources, political circuses, the failure of human leaders and institutions. The world is wounded.
Proponents of the Christian church often say that we have the answers to such issues. Answers, I'm not really sure that's quite how it works in the kingdom of God. For sure, Christians who are doing it right seek to follow Jesus Christ, who came to take on such sicknesses and injustices. He taught the full message of God, but he did not so much give an answer as much as he showed us how to live in, among, and through such problems. To be sure, the Church of Jesus Christ believes that a time is coming when he will wipe away every tear. But for now, we are to live as he did, with great compassion and lovingly standing with and supporting those who are in need.
For many years, something has been stirring regarding how the church is, or better yet, is not, at work. The vast majority of the American evangelical church's effort has been spent on the big show that is Sunday morning worship. And while many who lead have their attention on, at best, a calcifying institutionalism, or, at worst, the mixing of Christ's sacrifice with partisan politics, the mission of the church has faltered, and too often been lost.
I'm envisioning a new rhythm for the church. What we're being called to as individuals and as a group, it's really nothing new. It's simply that how we go about what we do, we must change to be more intentional and more dedicated to that which Jesus has asked us to do.
Worship is important. Some would say it's primary, and in a sense it is. Our reverence for who God is and how we display it, yes, that is of utmost importance. And yet,
it seems clear from the scriptures that what the church is called to do, as set forth by Jesus Christ himself, is not carried out on Sunday mornings. We are called to gather, and the church at its best always will. But the essence of why Jesus came, as set forth in the scriptures and in his example, is found in what the church does as a result of who God is making us to be. Early on in the pandemic, it became clear to me that something must be done. There's no going back to what we used to do. And as the heat of injustice sweltered into July, I could no longer stand the thought of doing what we used to do. Just a Sunday morning service with some singing and the pastor pontificating. Something else must be done. And so I wrote a paper. 3 critical questions regarding the future of North Street Community Church of the Nazarene. Jeremy Scott, lead pastor, July 31st, 2020. It's rather academic, and I won't read it to you right now, but I do invite you to read it. I'll make it available online. There's some critical background, history, and justification for where I think that we're headed. But the result of my studying, praying, wrestling, and ultimately hoping, the result is a different paradigm of how to do church. At least it's different for us. Truly, there's nothing new about what I'm asking us to consider, the vision I believe that God is calling us to. The church has long practiced these things. But it'll be different for us in terms of rhythm and pace, and ultimately it must be different for us in terms of intentionality and dedication to it. But the time has come. Really, it's been a long time coming. Let's get going.
We will worship. We will be discipled, and we will disciple. We will serve with compassion and stand up for justice. We will fellowship and celebrate. We will practice Sabbath.
So right now, our weekly rhythm is that we worship together, and it's been this way for a long, long time. So every Sunday, we have 2 services of worship, and of course COVID has thrown us for a loop on this for almost a year now. But that's been our practice. That's the practice of the majority of the Christian church. The focus of what we do every week is we get together and we sing, we read scriptures, we pray, we hear a sermon, we receive from the table, and we go home. But this new order, paradigm, rhythm, whatever you want to call it, seeks to do things a little bit differently. So the first Sunday of every month, we will gather together for a big worship service. The second Sunday, we'll gather together for discipleship. The third Sunday, for justice and emphasis on justice and compassion. The fourth Sunday, for intentional fellowship. And then if and when there is a fifth Sunday, there are 4 months every year that have 5 Sundays, we will practice extended Sabbath. So what does this all mean? So the first Sunday of every month, we would come together for a worship service, a big worship service. We one of the things that if you read the strategy paper that I wrote, one of the difficulties that we've had for several years now is that our church is rather scattered. We have people who sometimes drive from as far as an hour north, and others as far as 45 minutes to an hour south. And only 15% of our church actually lives in the town in which we worship, in Hingham. And so this has created some significant difficulties for us when it comes to really all aspects of what it means to gather together as a church. And so the vision here is that once a month, so 12 times in a given year, we will go all out for a worship service somewhere. There are a variety of ways that I've talked about this with the staff and the board, that perhaps, we'd rent out a school auditorium now and then. We would be outside somewhere for a mobile service. There are a lot of different ways we talked about it. This would be a big gathering with an emphasis on invitation and celebration. This would be an opportunity for a church of our size to really put ourselves into putting together a significant musical worship experience that we just couldn't pull off right now from week to week. But doing it once a month would really allow for just a much better presentation, for lack of a better word, more time for musicians who are, have full-time jobs to practice together, and to really give our best and give our all to this one service. I'll say more about this later. So so each year we also would have 3 services for the high holy days on the Christian calendar. Christmas Eve service, an Easter service, and a Pentecost service. So there would be 15 of these big gathering worship services each year. So the second Sunday of the week, we come together specifically for discipleship teaching. This looks like, perhaps special speakers, special emphases, but a real emphasis on spiritual formation and practices. So we're going to talk about tithing. We're going to talk about prayer. We're going to talk about even what it means to worship. But we're going to talk about the various elements of our discipleship as we seek to follow Christ, and also as we seek to call others into discipleship. A lot more to say about that in the days to come. Third Sunday of the month, we will gather for the things of justice, righteousness, compassion, and service. Some Sundays this will mean we just have a time of awareness where we come and we learn about the injustices perhaps in our own towns or in our state or in our nation or elsewhere in the world. There'll be some mission emphases here. We'll talk a lot about liberation. This is one of the aspects that I feel most deeply about how God has been speaking to me and through me in the last several months, and perhaps you've heard that in the sermon series. A real emphasis on Jesus's announcement in Nazareth on liberation for oppressed and marginalized peoples. More to say about that in the days to come. An emphasis on action and initiative. So some Sundays, some of these Justice Sundays, we come together for awareness, but other times we'll be out there doing something, acting. It might mean that we have to do something on a day other than Sunday, depending on what's going on a given moment. Third Sunday, Justice initiatives. The fourth Sunday, we come together to celebrate, to fellowship, to be intentional about it. Certainly to eat together and to do that well. We're envisioning catering meals for these often, sometimes perhaps doing the old-fashioned potluck, but really to have an emphasis on connection and hospitality, to be intentional about how we eat together, how we sit and talk together, but to just have this Sunday every month to do nothing more than fellowship, as we are called to do. Sometimes we've turned fellowship just into just a meal, and this is really a way for us to explore what it means to go through the things of koinonia. And so again, this will have to do with hospitality as well, to challenge ourselves to one another. What does it mean to support one another all week long, but to really begin this community connection through a Sunday just for fellowship, if you can imagine that. And then again, every third month has a fifth Sunday. Generally, that's how it goes in a year. And on that when those fifth Sundays come up, we won't gather. This will be a time of extended Sabbath. We should be practicing Sabbath every week, and in some ways every day. But this would be a time of extended Sabbath, where the church is not called to a location, but is given time and space to rest, to retreat. And sometimes we actually could do that in various groups or as a church. This would be space for longer retreats to get away. But for individuals, for families, for couples, to be intentional about getting away, about resting, being restored, and enjoying the creation that God has placed around us. This is the understanding of Sabbath in the very beginning in the creation story. You see it in our word recreation. And so there are a number of creative ways that might play out for different households, for different individuals, different families, as it pertains to what gives you rest and restoration and a reconnection to God. This will also give some time and space for staff development and staff retreats and some of the things that are vitally important for the leadership of the church. Then, however, every Sunday, regardless of these 5 different things that could happen from week to week, every Sunday we would continue our Word and Table gathering. That's currently our 8:15, our early service, which really is it's a simple and intentional, I'm using that word a lot, aren't I? Intentional gathering surrounding the long-held Christian practices of worship, the Apostles' Creed, the sacraments. This will also be a service to provide time and space for those things that we regularly need to do as a church, whether it's baptism or reception of members, or recognition of the development of leaders and pastors, and those kinds of things that happen in a corporate gathering. Kind of describe this as low-key but high church. An emphasis on order and simplicity. This is a service that when people show up on any given Sunday, the specifics of the elements may change. The songs are going to change from week to week,
but the order of the service won't change, which is very important for a lot of people as they come to worship. This is the time for those who need to come to worship every week, which hopefully it's my presumption and assumption that this service will grow over time, but that'll be very simple, and it won't be very taxing on the pastoral staff and leadership, who can focus on these other 5 emphases from week to week. These are out of order for some reason, but during the week, this is very important. It'll be reinforcement of all these different things and themes that will run through all of these different emphases, reinforced online through Bible study, discipleship triads, regular messages and check-ins with staff, short video messages of greeting and texting, actually, social media. There's a real disconnect from Sunday to Sunday, and it's our hope that through, again, these weekly emphases, that we can run threads through them to keep us mindful and in action as individuals, as households, and in our homes and neighborhoods and spaces of work throughout the week. Other considerations, because I'm sure there are a lot of there are a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions. This is not a fully fledged plan at this point. It's a general plan, and a lot of it will have to be worked out. In terms of staff and leadership, the board has asked, and I don't anticipate any reduction of any of our current staff, but and I'm already talking to them and working through with the staff, and will be in the next month and a half, what some of these things will look like. An invitation to more, actually, and an invitation to shift some responsibilities with those who are currently here. But just as much, there are some people who aren't yet here, some leaders, some pastors, that ministry directors that will need to be found. It's my intention for each of these given weeks, worship, discipleship, justice, fellowship, that there will be a staff member that oversees that emphasis. We'll all support one another each week, but there will be a responsible staff member for any given week. I'm happy to report, and this is an announcement to most everyone, we've been asking for help, people to go above and beyond their regular tithes and offerings in being able to eliminate the mortgage before the end of our fiscal year on March 31st. And I'm happy to report that we, by commitments, will be able to do that. Commitments from people will be able to eliminate the mortgage in the next month. Praise God, and just thanks to people who've been able to go above and beyond in these days. We had people give as little as $5 and as much as tens of thousands to be able to do this, and each one contributing to this, and it's just it tickles my heart that we could do that, which is enabling for us to consider staff. A significant part of staff and leadership on this will include an emphasis on discipleship and attention and care for youth, children and youth, and more to say about that in the days to come. Timing. Listen, you probably know the answer to this, but we are still in the midst of COVID, and there's really we don't know, right? We don't know. We just don't know. Nobody knows. I still have a slight hope that we could kick off some aspects of this on Pentecost, which is May 21st this year. But at this point, that may be looking to be a little bit overly optimistic. But certainly have much of this in place by September, as we would get into the fall. But all to say, we just don't know on timing yet. The anchor of Hull. The anchor was one of the significant questions in the strategy paper, if you go back and read that. And I'm excited about this plan as it relates to the anchor. Again, COVID has impacted the ministry of the anchor, but Pastor Kurt and Emily and now Amy on staff have have really held us together, and also a bunch of volunteers and just key leaders at the Anchor. And what's developing in Hull is a significant intentional community surrounding the things of recovery. It's very church-like. And I think that the Anchor might become for us a catalyst, an example, a model for other ways in which we can have gatherings, core groups in other towns and regional areas. But ultimately this, to begin, doesn't change anything of great significance for the Anchor. In fact, the Anchor will be for us a model for our discipleship and justice weeks. And Pastor Kurt, I'm hoping, will lead us in even more significantly in the things of discipleship, doing some of the incredible things he's doing through the Anchor of Hull for the whole of our church. We'll also, I guess I'll mention here, when it comes to the justice initiatives, we're talking about liberation and the liberating gospel that Christ announced to us. And we have significant inroads already when it comes to, again, the Anchor, obviously, but also our shelter, Friends of the Homeless. May we return to an effort where the shelter isn't simply something we're proud of, that grew out of our church a couple decades ago, but it becomes again for us a place of service, a place of solidarity, a place of advocacy for our church. And there are other things I anticipate as well, as when it comes to prison, those who are imprisoned, those who are sick, and other marginalized peoples. Finally, just have to say, there's just a lot we don't know yet, right? We'll have to learn as we go along, as we make significant steps toward these things. But we do know that we can't do it without the support of the greater church and congregation. If this ends up just being, a vision of Pastor Jeremy, it will be ecclesiologically wrong. What that means is that means that's not the way the church works, but also it will fail based on effort. And so right now, this is your call to prayer and to respond and to ask key questions. But very often right now, the answer might be we don't know yet. We just don't know yet. I wanted to share a little bit about what some of your board members are saying. We've been talking about this for several months, and it's been hard to wait because of COVID and all of that. But I just wanted to let you hear from their hearts. Jennifer Colson shared that she's excited about changing the way we do things so we have the opportunity to see things differently. Our world is changing, and therefore the way we minister to it and worship in it also has to change. And I'm excited to see where this leads us. Jen Shepard says, I certainly have done my best to come to practice being a servant and someone who speaks Christ's love through my actions primarily and occasionally through my words outside of our little community. But it excites me to think of new opportunities to share through impactful works of service. When I am in this community, I am not alone. And when this community reaches out to its greater surroundings, the people touched are also not alone. They find good in an often harsh world. They find family who may even love them better than their biological family. They can find a way to heal and a way to use their journey for good. It feels that way for me when I allow God to use me in that way, and branching out beyond these four walls to be the hands and feet of Christ all together every week feels like the most important calling to give and to receive that we could hope for. Pastor Dennis, I understand that we're moving toward continuing the Word and Table service each week, and once a month a service rather like we and most churches have been accustomed, a celebration worship experience. Another Sunday each month will be for fellowship, another for Christian education, and one for a social justice / social service with hands-on involvement. Each of these is worship, offering opportunity for personal engagement. I like the prospect of worship being more than simply coming and sitting. Sarah Troxler said, "I am excited that we are thinking about the future as the church and as a community. The world is very different than it was a year ago, and frankly, it was different before we were able to recognize it and before the shared pandemic experience slowed us down and gave us time to think and observe. We have a shared experience with folks around us: pandemic, idolatry, racism, social injustices, to name just a few, even though it has all affected us a little differently as individuals. Being part of a church, or the church, doesn't make us above or isolated from these experiences. I'm excited that as a church we are thinking about the needs of those around us and how to meet them in a more, cute buzzword, relevant way, while also doing what we do best, being in community with one another." And finally, Rachel shares, "What excites me most about the plan for our church is the fact that we are adapting in a world that no longer feels church is necessary. I'm excited that we are meeting people where they are at and going to them in a sense. I'm excited that we can be a light in a world that some days feels dark. I'm also excited Jesus would use us in such a way to tell others about Him in all different forms other than just a traditional church service."
People are searching. We are hoping. People are looking for something to belong to. It's easy to receive the comforts that are easily accessible or most familiar to us. But deep down, we all know that we are living in a world experiencing a lot of brokenness. Acknowledging the brokenness is the first step toward hope. And we believe that there is hope, and we all have a responsibility to play our part on the path toward hope and justice. It isn't always easy, but it is worth it, and the right thing to do. We are not alone, and the best of all is, God is with us.